So audio is now live. So whatever you say, somebody's calling me.
Testing.
Oh, that was you. That was you.
Can we talk about our breadcrumbs all over your shoulders? Fried chicken crumbs. So after this live video stream, it goes out to...
It gets archived as well. It gets archived, yeah.
It's amazing how this stuff is so accessible now.
All right, I think we're live. We're gonna go turn up the screen. And who are you guys? Introduce yourselves.
Go for it.
My name's Diggy. I'm actually originally from Vancouver. Parents went there in the early 70s, and I was born and raised in Vancouver. Had a chance to get back to Asia. We spent the last 10 years in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Philippines, and now Taiwan.
My name's Lee. I've spent the last 11 years living outside, or in and around Hong Kong, working in China, Taiwan, now more so Japan. And I'm originally from the UK.
So how's life being multicultural and living, growing up?
You want to start? Or you
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, for me, it was interesting. I was raised with an English mom. So obviously, and in my hometown, there was no Asian people. So when I was a kid, I was like the only Asian kid, and all my family were white. So I was always the odd one out as a child.
See.
And it was, I think initially, like from a child, for me, it was a very double-edged sword. Like, I remember being a kid and wanting to just fit in with everybody else. And that was really difficult because obviously I was always separate from everybody. They would always identify me as being different to them. And I hated that when I was a kid, absolutely hated it. And then as I got older, then I think people mature. And in Leicester, where I'm from, everybody started to recognise I was special rather than different. And so throughout my childhood growing up, I found that it actually started to become quite a benefit. And yeah, it took me a long time to recognise it, but I really appreciate my mixed heritage.
Are there phases where you start trying to belong in one and the other, or is it always you have your own ground and you end up very unique? And I'm sure there were classmates like you as well.
So I mean, for me, it was always, when I was younger, I tried to identify, but you'd always be rejected out. Or you'd always be kind of pushed out or isolated. And then the same would go for both cultures. When I'd go to Hong Kong, they would never really recognise me as being Chinese. And when I go to back home, I was always recognised as being Chinese and not from England or not English. So you're kind of forced to, which I think is an amazing thing now, you're forced to develop your own identity from a very young age. You have to learn to be comfortable with just who you are. You can't hide behind any race or religion. It's very difficult to be able to like join the little group and hide away there. Right. So I think for me, I embraced that. I think around 15 onwards, I really started to see that, hey, it's actually pretty cool being different from everybody else.
So 15 years old, you had awareness of the fact that this is who you are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I had no choice. So I tried to embrace my Asian culture. I tried to embrace English culture. And then I realised it's just totally okay to just be in between and actually just. And what I started to do was to kind of cherry pick. Actually,
I see.
I don't need to be an English guy. I don't need to be a Chinese guy. I can just pick and choose what is me, what I like to be, and things I don't like, then I don't need to have them as part of who I am. And yeah, that was very. I think people think I'm a relatively liberated person.
How about you?
So I thought my background was a bit different because growing up in Vancouver, my parents immigrated quite early. My mom's about half Dutch.
Okay.
So, but still traditionally Chinese family. So my father and mother spoke Cantonese at home. But arriving in, I was born and raised in Canada with my sister in Vancouver. We didn't know that we were very Chinese.
Oh, okay.
When we got there, Similar to you, we were, there's a lot of immigrants there. So my friends were Spanish, Indian, Filipino, and my classroom had nobody speaking Chinese.
Yeah.
So we just felt that, okay, we speak Chinese at home, that's basically it. And then we experienced the 97 immigration in Hong Kong, Hanover. When Hong Kong was returned back to China, we saw an influx of Cantonese families moving into Vancouver. And that's when the first time I started meeting people my age that spoke Cantonese.
I see.
And that was the inkling of understanding where I sit culturally. Like, oh, they didn't treat me as Chinese either because they thought that you look kind of funny. Right?
That's true. That's true.
You sound funny, but you kind of understand everything I say. Cause I think one of the biggest influences that our parents gave to us was that we spoke Cantonese at home. But the next level of language, as most people learn in pop culture, is you watch media. And Hong Kong was one of the #1 media conglomerates, TVB and all the movies, right? So we fell in love with pop culture and music, so we spoke quite well, relatively, for not really going back to Hong Kong. And then we sort of assimilated and had a connection to a lot of the new immigrants to Vancouver. The biggest eye-opener for that, when I was telling you guys, was their entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of the people from Hong Kong, their families were from young and small businesses that are coming to Canada. And that changed my perspective on career path, life, and where I am in Asia now.
Yeah, that's true for me too.
Huge, because I think the hurdles that went through as an entrepreneur really shaped my thinking.
I see. I see. So you speak English more often?
Yeah, I
than Cantonese.
So I was raised with my mother, and so I come from a council estate or project, whatever you want to call it, and it was just me and my mom as a child. I was raised really British, so
I see.
All of my family were white, Irish, Italian, you name it, and I never really had much access to the Asian side of the family until I was much older in my teenage years. So I was raised with one language, and when I moved to Hong Kong, I felt quite imperative that I need to, in order for my own self-respect, that I needed to learn Chinese, because I just thought it's crazy that I'm going to come and live in Hong Kong and China, and I can't speak to the majority of the people that live here. It just seemed like I had to make the effort, so I did, and I started to pick up Cantonese, and basically got relatively fluent in it. But it was pretty painful when you come from a one language background.
It's a very difficult language to learn.
Yeah, really difficult.
I was there
Cantonese especially.
14 years, and I learned a little bit of Mandarin, but Cantonese was always very, very
It's a very inaccessible
difficult.
language. It's very inaccessible. Yeah. There's not easy ways to learn it.
Yeah, because I still relate myself as more of a Canadian, but I think it's just the language that was taught. And because of the media, Cantonese is a very slang-based language. So a lot of people think it's a 9-tone. It's really 11-tone language.
What's that?
11 tones.
11 tones.
Yeah. Mandarin's 4 tones.
Right.
Mandarin's 4 tones. So it's an amazing language to learn because a lot of the nuances. Well, Hong Kong and Canton was a really a fishing village when we first started. So language was not a deep-rooted a language that you read and write like Mandarin is, right?
How about French? You're in Vancouver. They don't speak French there.
I took 2 years of French.
But
it is. But in Vancouver, because West Coast doesn't really have a strong French culture,
of course,
nor a lot of the immigrants are from France, the early days. So it's really Quebecois, Montreal that has an influence. So the majority of the people that took French dropped it after their first 2 years.
I see.
I mean, I wish, in hindsight, I'd stick to it because I followed the luxury sector for a long time. I didn't know French was so important to luxury, automotive, pharmaceutical, UN, government, everything is French. Right?
French.
But I did pick up Mandarin. Spent 3 years in Shanghai, and that really helped me develop my Mandarin skills.
Great.
Yeah.
So what do you guys do? What do you do?
So I'm actually in the middle of figuring out what's next.
Okay, you're a lucky one.
I have a multitude of different experiences, like you gentlemen here. I have a design firm in Hong Kong. I've had a long tenure in the fashion industry, in strategy, communications, and design. And then I went back into my roots of tech. I spent 3 years in Shanghai in the tech industry. And then I had a side opportunity to spend a year in Manila, which is amazing. And now I'm in Taiwan working on a couple of crypto blockchain projects, as well as maybe building a new company out of Taiwan.
Okay, cool. And I know what you do.
Yeah.
Is your name James?
By day. By day. People know what I do in the daytime.
What do you do during daytime? You're a designer.
Yeah, so started, let me think, I've been for the last 8 or 9 years now. I've been making tech, especially focused around iPhone and Android smartphones. I just saw, a while ago, I just saw there was a big gap in the, especially corporate gift sector at the time, to develop tech for corporate gift, because nobody else was doing it. Everybody was focused on retail at that time, and I just figured if I wanted to enter a new market as a new company, I had to go in a different angle. And I saw that tech was rising up, everybody was changing to iPhones, and there was a need for a lot of accessories for these new range of phones. And so I started to develop products with like logo spaces for corporate gifting, and that gave me the platform to then go into retail. And
your English language helped you be able to market and publicize the product, but you also, with your roots, you can go to China and use that advantage.
I mean, one thing that was fantastic and is about being mixed race was the fact that once I had learned Chinese, and as an older man, that I started to become more accepted by everybody.
When did you learn Chinese? Because it wasn't a natural thing.
25.
Oh, 26. I see. So you went back in there to learn it instead of being growing up with it.
Yeah, I couldn't speak anything back then. So I had to just pick it up. And luckily, when I first came to Hong Kong, I was modelling. And I've never been good at just sitting around doing nothing. I think I've got ADHD or something I'm sure a doctor would give me some medication for. I'm not good at sitting doing nothing. So I'd go into modelling jobs, and a modelling job, you go in the morning, makeup, hair, wait for the shot to get ready, and I'd have hours with these people that don't speak English. And so I thought at the time, I was really poor back then. I was just like, can't afford classes, can't afford school, but these guys can speak the language I want to learn, and they can speak low-level English, and then I'd just be sat there all day, like, how do you say this in Chinese?
I see. What is this?
The girls, right?
What is this? Was it the girls? There's always the girls. I'm sure of that.
I'm sure they helped me with that. And so I basically absorbed the language from the locals, and that's the only way you can learn Cantonese, actually. Because Cantonese, there's not easy books, there's no like pinyin, there's no like
I think
system.
You really have to speak to people and consistently.
Karaoke, like if you go to learn, Japanese, you can learn through songs, but with Chinese, you've got a written language and a sang language.
Are you sure? 本当かな? Can you learn Japanese through songs? 本当に? マジかよ.
Because you can see when you read a Japanese song, you have the katakana hiragana, so you only need to learn those alphabets. You can already capture most of the written version.
Yes.
With Cantonese especially, the written version of the language does not match with the spoken language. So if you're learning Cantonese songs, it's kind of like learning Bible English and then trying to speak Bible English. It doesn't match.
Yeah, Cantonese is a lot of the spoken Cantonese is innuendos.
Yeah.
I see.
It's kind of like mnemonics.
It's kind of like if Japanese had traditional Chinese writing put over the top of all of your language. And so when you write it, you're writing it in Chinese format, and then when you speak, it's the Japanese grammar, Japanese format. Because Cantonese as a spoken language, a lot of words we say day to day, they don't have a character to connect to that word. When you want to write like no, we would say hai, but there's no hai that you would use written. It's bat hai. So it's a completely different word. So when you learn via karaoke, the words you pick up, that's the words that they use on the news. But people, so for example, when I watch the news, I am completely lost most of the time because they use a separate version of the language that is like Shakespearean English.
It's a proper side.
So this is Cantonese news. If you watch the news, it's very difficult to figure out what they're saying.
Cantonese is proper Chinese, so it's the same way you write Mandarin.
So Mandarin's a little bit different.
A lot easier,
because Mandarin, the spoken format of Mandarin matches the written version of the language, but Cantonese is like a
slang-based.
Yeah, a slang-based variation of this language.
So here's what's different about Jiggy and me, who are very similar, because we've grown up learning English and Japanese or English and Cantonese together since day one.
Yes.
But in your case, it's you had to go back and revisit it.
I had to go totally learn from scratch.
From zero.
Yeah, from zero.
I'm sure, Jiggy, you can count in 1 to 10 in both languages. Back and forth, right?
I'm pretty fluent in Cantonese because I actually ran a company in Chinese.
Okay, so you can do that. so I think people growing up with both languages, they kind of I can translate things on the fly to Japanese.
That's right. Yeah.
Could you do that too, or is it more?
I got to the point where I can almost think in Chinese now if I want to, but it's really, it's tough. Like I do a thing for fun where I go to karaoke, and there'll be an English song, and then I'll switch it to Cantonese, and I'll be trying to freestyle the English song, but with a Cantonese grammar, using Cantonese. Yeah. And I have the whole place crying with laughter, especially Cantonese speaking people, because they know what I'm trying to do, and then they're like, because it's just so far off, you can't always match up the sentences or the words. But I always challenge myself like that. I try to keep on the fly thinking in Chinese.
You know, when I grew up here, I took the train to go to school like everybody else. When I go to the little kiosks where the old ladies were selling newspapers, candies, and coffee, and I would go up to them, and there wasn't a whole bunch of half people here or people that look very strong resemblance of being a Westerner or wherever you came from. And people usually end up thinking I'm from Eurasia, which is in Siberia or somewhere. They would look at me and say, "Oba-chan, Oba-chan, ame kudasai," I'll ask for candies. And she's like, "Oh, you speak Japanese?" And I'll say, "I'm Japanese." And then she will like reckon the fact that I am Japanese. But if I tell her, no, Benkyuchu, and act like I'm a foreigner, she will think I'm completely a foreigner. So you kind of influence what they think of you by replying to them as such.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's true. I find... you know, what's changed for me is I was getting quite fluent in Cantonese to the point where I could communicate, and then I stopped speaking Cantonese. So I don't speak anymore because I found speaking English got me what I wanted in business, and it got me, if we were talking to somebody trying to negotiate a deal like with mobile phone contracts, things like this, if I don't get my way, speaking English to people, it puts them at such a disadvantage when their English isn't so fluent, that I just started to speak English all the time in Hong Kong.
You know, the language part was always a big part of being a mixed culture and everything, but how about the food part? Because you grew up having...
When I first came to Hong Kong, I hated all Asian food. I couldn't eat sushi. I couldn't... Wasabi was like...
Oh, you're so
horrible.
British.
Nearly everything, even dim sum, I hated it. Everything, I hated it. I'd been lucky every summer I'd come to Hong Kong, and then my Chinese family used to bully me by like giving me the craziest food every time we go for a meal, and like pretty much forcing me to eat it. You know, like, so I got to an age where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to eat it. I'm not give them the satisfaction of bullying me with food. Yeah. And then I just conditioned myself, and
just for another camera angle there.
I think I only started to really like Japanese food when I was around 28.
And you took me to that place yesterday?
Yeah. But the thing is what I've realised as I got older is conditioning, like mental conditioning is the problem. It's not that I don't like this food, it's just it's not familiar to me. And, you know, we're animals, we're humans, but we're animals, and we have an instinctive fear of things we don't know because it might kill us if we've never experienced that. But what I started to do, is, especially with language as well, learning Chinese, is I had to change the way I thought about language. Which is why Japanese has become a lot faster than Chinese, because I found an interpretation of how I look at Japanese in a way that my brain can bring it in very quickly. I've had to learn these skills to kind of accelerate my ability to learn languages. And the same thing for food as well. I got to the point where somewhere in my mind, even the most scary looking food now, I'm committed to it. Like, I could never do that before, but now something like, you know, they can have a monkey's head with its head cut open and brain there. You should try it, it's amazing. And I'll be like, just give it a try. But it took me so long
I've actually eaten that.
Have you really?
In old days when I went to the factories, firework factories in inner China, and they did serve that. That's amazing. A long time ago.
I think I've tried it too, actually.
For me, food has a huge, because I think I was just talking to Lee about it earlier. My dad is quite a traditional Chinese, so we ate at home all the time unless he had tutoring or sports. But my mom early on taught me how to cook Cantonese.
Oh, that's good.
So I know how to make Cantonese home cooking. It's coming in handy when it comes to dating, because I think cooking is...
I see.
I actually love going to... And unlike you, because my command of Chinese was right when I spoke Cantonese before English, actually. So when I walk down to the market to go shopping for groceries, they think I'm a foreigner in Hong Kong. But when I started negotiating on the one lettuce, right, they know that I'm not.
We get away with it. You know what I noticed when you got, okay, go back to the main point of this topic, is when you're mixed and when you're a little bit different from everybody else, there's two ways you can embrace it. You can either feel outcast and rejected because you can't fit in, or you can totally ride it and take advantage of the fact that you're special, because people will either dislike it or they'll love it. And I find that going back to like going to factories and trying to like work with Asian people or Westerners, I embraced who I am, and I'm so comfortable with who I am now, because when I go to, especially in business, it's like I can go to an English person or an American, talk to them in fluent English, talk to them like I'm a Westerner, and they will look at me like, he's kind of Asian, but he also gets me. And I trust this guy because he speaks my language, he thinks like I do. But then at the same time, I can go to the factory, speak Chinese to them, they see my face and they go, he's kind of Chinese too. We trust him too because he can speak our language and he understands our culture. So this was a huge power as I got older that I never realised when I was younger, is that I have the benefit of, I can be Asian when I need to be Asian, and I can also be Western when I need to be Western. And you know, the British charm can kick in when I go to America, and then I can come to Japan. And the beauty about Japan that I found is amazing. I'm covered in tattoos. The beauty about Japan being mixed is that if your Japanese is not super fluent like your native, I do feel like I get a little bit of special treatment here, where they let me off. If I make a mistake, like if I make a politeness mistake, they're not going to scold me as much as they would like a local born and raised Japanese person. They will just accept, oh, he's a foreigner, it's a different set of rules over there.
Yeah, Japan is very tolerant of people that are different, but it's very strict towards its own in many ways.
I've seen that.
And then what's the differentiation between its own and the different people? I think it's more based on company, social, where you went to school. But certainly it's different from Germany, where probably they're more stricter to everybody.
Correct.
So I think in Hong Kong too, I think when I used to not make sense to the Hong Kongers, shopping or eating or doing whatever I was doing, they couldn't care less. They would just say like, go away. Okay, fine, fine,
they
go away.
They keep it real in Hong Kong. They
Fine,
keep it real.
go away.
Like,
so it kind of gets easy when you're trying to negotiate the price for the lens, and the old guy there that is in the pawn shop is getting pissed at you, but you're still telling him this is how much he will pay, and he's like, it's not even a question of discussing it. But you still persist. It's a fun thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've fully embraced my mixed heritage now.
Well,
and I love it. I honestly love it. Like, I think it's the best thing my mother did.
You go, okay.
was dating a guy from the completely opposite side of the world. I mean, I can just foresee one day, I hope that the world becomes a mixed world where religion and race, it doesn't matter anymore, because everybody's got a bit of something else in them. They're not going to hold those like extreme like racist views towards each other, because when I meet people from different parts of the world, I just don't care. I don't. If I like you, it's because you are a cool person.
I think he's really unique, being an old family and Dutch, and being in Canada, where there's like complete difference between the old settled people, the early people, and the new people that are there. And I have a few friends that actually really love and live in Vancouver, and it's a great place to live outside of Hong Kong, because you're given the right of vote to go there. But a lot of Chinese have moved to LA, Irvine area. Of course, they're everywhere. Yokohama, here we are in Chinatown, so it's had traditional generations of Chinese from Shanghai, Guangzhou, Taiwan. Most of my classmates are Chinese or of Chinese descent. So everybody kind of is mixed, but when you're mixed with Asian, and then when you're mixed with Western and Asian, the outlook is different, as you can see the products, and so hence there's that difference of struggling between, you know, which one are you?
It's not a struggle.
Is it?
It's
not? Okay.
For me, I mean, I know a lot of mixed Eurasian people that are struggling with their identity.
They do.
They do. Like
they want to belong somewhere.
For example, I know a really beautiful girl in Hong Kong, and she looks very, very Western. You couldn't even tell she's Chinese. She had a career in like entertainment. But she has completely rejected her Asian roots. She can speak fluent Chinese, both Mandarin and Cantonese, but she insists to be presented as a Western girl.
Isn't that something in passing? Isn't she still young and may discover that
not that young
later?
Anymore. She was. Not that young anymore.
See.
But I mean, the thing is that obviously she's had a bad experience with Asian culture to the point where she's rejected it. But the problem, what I never understood with her is that you're in Hong Kong. Your main, if you want to be successful in your industry, you should be embracing your Asian culture. You should be using it to your advantage. If you speak and read and write, why are you not presenting that information to the world and showing? And you've got like 1.4 billion people north of you that would embrace you as one of their own. If only you would just show that you're an Asian person.
I think the main difference I see a lot of people rejecting this cultural shift and change, even if they spoke fluently at home. Our experiences growing up in Vancouver was that we spoke, but we were naturally sort of nurtured and groomed in Vancouver. So we met Chinese-speaking kids at a young age. So like when I went back to Vancouver last summer, I still have friends from 6 years old that are Spanish, Italian, Indian. But when we were growing up in Vancouver, all our families were middle income. All our families, like, you know, I'd walk over to their house, they'd make me curry, I'd make them dumplings. A lot of people that went into the heart of a city, like a big city like Hong Kong, was very tough.
Yeah, that's true.
I find that it was because it's a hustle city and then people are just making money, very aggressive. We grew up playing basketball,
me too.
riding on bikes, and then didn't care.
I grew up collecting car badges off the back of
So wasn't there a culture shock? Because
for myself? Or
for you, because you're growing up very peaceful, easy,
the Hong Kong folks came very quickly, and they brought a lot of wealth, obviously, right? But I think generally when we're in, they started coming in grade 4 or 5, we're still quite young. So we started playing together and started slowly growing up with the kids from Hong Kong, right? But I didn't really lose my Western friends, right? But I also opened up my ability to accept Chinese friends. And that way it was really starting to see, like looking back at it, it was a huge impact on my life because there was the innocence of meeting these young folks from Hong Kong and still keeping the friends from the Western world, right? But again, to Hong Kong, I was already very comfortable in my shell, but knowing that when I think in both Chinese and English, right? And I could dissect it, and I could catch a lot of the innuendos of what people are saying. And Hong Kong people can be very nasty.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Not in your face. I mean, every culture can be, right? But I think the fact that I have the command of the language strong enough, but I have the remnants of my Western culture where I'll say it as it is. They might not appreciate it, but then they'll respect it. Right. So I find that pretty empowering. But I find that a lot of my friends that actually experienced a race issue in Australia, and they didn't like the Asian culture. But they can relate to the Western culture.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But I mean, the trick is to just embrace both. Like, you don't need to be one or the other. You could just cherry pick. For me, it's like, there's certain things about being English that I really think are great and better than a lot of other cultures. So they're the things I want to keep dear to me. But there's a lot of things about Asian culture that I think are way better than English culture. So then I'll just steal those pieces, and this is my ideology. I form my own ideology based on what I've seen from all my cultural experiences, to the point where I would believe that I'm a person that's kind of transcended being I'm British or Chinese or Japanese or Canadian. It's just that I am me, and I'm unapologetic for doing that. Like, I've got English values, but I've also got some Hong Kong values too. When I go back to England, people talk, they're like, you talk so fast, like, and you talk about money. And I'm like, because I'm Chinese. That's what we do. That's what we do. We talk about money and what we've been doing, what businesses we're doing. That's a Chinese thing, but I'm comfortable with that. And at the same time, it's like when I go back to England, I'm comfortable with going down for like a fish and chips and a beer and chilling like in the garden, having a barbecue, and you get to experience both cultures in it, and I take the best of both.
But I think the biggest impact definitely is that our ability to travel. and understand, accept opening cultures and having conversation. Because even when I go back to Vancouver, my friends haven't left. 20 years.
Me too. Yeah, I'm the only one that escaped.
It's not like it's not like now ignorance is bliss or knowledge is power. But to me, it's like they live their lives, they're very happy, but they're confined by what they want to live.
Yeah,
so
they're in a. They build.
They're in a bubble. They're happy
themselves
in a
little wall,
like
a comfort wall.
But it's
and
just
then they don't want to leave that.
Like this week, I spoke to Lee, and within an hour, I booked a ticket, and I'm in Japan from Taiwan.
No, I heard you just flew out here.
I flew out here because I had some time, and I couldn't even switch my language fast enough. I was speaking to people in Mandarin.
I'm like that too. So
I woke up not knowing that I was in Japan, but I was like, I'm in Tokyo.
Yeah. I was trying to speak Cantonese to somebody last night. Some girl, I couldn't get the Japanese out, and I switched to Cantonese, and I'm like, oh yes, wrong country.
But these are the things that I love. And meeting Francis today, like I love. We're laughing at things, but it's really the ability to break down cultures and meet new people.
Yeah, I mean, it's been hard for me coming to Japan.
Yeah.
And thinking, hey, I can live here.
Yeah.
And then realizing that the Japanese government will be like, no, you can't. And then I feel like, why can't I live here?
Yeah.
Because you're not Japanese. And I'm like, but like, because I'm just so used to being able to just kind of go in and go out, and the world has become my home.
So interesting point that you do have classmates or kids you grew up with that never left.
Yeah.
And the ability to travel, which is, I think it's the mental state where, okay, I'm going to go a year in the Philippines. Okay, I can be 3 years in Shanghai. Oh, I don't mind living in Hong Kong, which I did. So I lived in LA 6 years, Hong Kong 14 years, which I didn't speak the language. I just went there on my own. So that's really important because it opens your mind.
Yes.
But because of my mixed background, it was easier for me. With others stayed, or they had their family businesses, or they got to invest it here. And I left having my own company. I just let somebody else run it.
It's because you realize there is something more. Like we are part of something a little bit more than just the bubble of race.
Yeah.
And when you feel that way, that you're not really accepted fully by these groups, and you're not accepted fully by these groups, you are out of it. And so the world really does become something that
but
you need
on
to
the
go
other side, isn't it sort of too stuck up of this way of thinking that we were special, so we left? There's a lot of Hong Kong people that go overseas, or Chinese construction workers that go to places we never heard of and work there and bring those experiences home. So I think it might be easier for us because
it is easier
I think
us.
I think we just do it out of we don't work for anybody. Or you're an entrepreneur, so you have that freedom. So I think being an entrepreneur is also important. Not the financial freedom, because I don't think that you don't need to be rich to move out.
Correct.
And try something new.
Yep.
But
I was poor. Like when I moved to Hong Kong, I had nothing.
Yep.
I literally just sold my car and I had this tiny little bit of cash with a huge amount of debt back home. And I just thought I could put this into my debt, but I need this to like try and find a new way of living.
Yeah. I think for me, I think it's once you break through the barrier of your safety net and you're comfortable outside your comfort zone. The fundamental is really the exploration.
Yeah.
We're very keen on.
I think it gets easier the first time. When you leave your comfort zone, the first time, and then you build something outside of it, you recognize, hey, this wasn't too hard. I thought this would be extremely difficult.
Because we have similar sort of demeanor, like we're very happy-go-lucky, adaptability. And now in our generation, it's a digital world. We have friends in Japan, we have friends in India, in Berlin, anywhere in the world that we have friends that are at least 2 degrees separation.
Right.
And I find that a bunch of my friends from Vancouver immigrated to Tokyo because they played ice hockey. They had full scholarships.
I
play ice hockey, right? And they're in Japan, and then they end up finding a Japanese wife, getting married, and stay here, right? So it's very, very interesting because now I did not expect myself to pick up and move to Shanghai.
Yeah,
the opportunity presented itself, and that's like a second chapter for me to learn Mandarin. Like, my girlfriend didn't speak a single word of English, but she typed to me in Chinese every day. That's how I learned Mandarin.
I see.
And then I had the boardroom meetings and fundraising, and I had to pick up Mandarin quickly. And in 3 years of full exposure and a 15-person team, my Mandarin started getting really quite good. And I think it's very different than Cantonese, right? So I do think that, and then Philippines, I picked up Tagalog a little bit. And then I think it was quite amazing to have the ability to adapt. And I find that, I'm actually not afraid of living anywhere in the world.
Yeah, me too.
Right? I think we'll find ways of adapting.
If anything, it becomes like a challenge. Like for me, it's like I've always wanted to live here, like we were talking the other day. And it's like, how can I find a way to make that happen?
And you just convinced me to move here too.
Yeah, no,
so
he's
I'm
moving
like,
here too, so-
So I want to ask you guys for an advice.
Yeah.
My son is living in Shenzhen. He's 5 years old.
Yeah.
He used to speak English because he used to go to international school in Kowloon Tong.
Yeah.
Then he moved to Shenzhen, and I came here to run the company.
Yeah.
So he's with mom, and they're just Mandarin only.
Yeah.
And recently, I do the WeChat videos with him, and he only talks to me in Mandarin.
Okay.
And so it's he is going to international school in Shenzhen, but it's very. I can see I'm missing the most important years of his life, and it's becoming more difficult to talk to him physically because of the language that he's developing so quickly in a different way.
Yes.
Would he ever have a chance to learn English again, even just by being in Shenzhen in international?
He's 5 now.
Yeah, even in international environment.
My take on it, because I have a lot of friends that went to international school, CIS, Hong Kong, HKIS.
But that's all in Hong Kong. But he's in Shenzhen International.
Well, some people. So Shenzhen actually, as you know, is the fastest growing city in China, right?
And they do have good schools too.
Great schools, and they've now
difficult to get in.
Very hard to get in, and they're now half between tier 1 now. They got tier 1 status in Dong 1 area, right? So I do think that 5 is still a very young age, but I do think that to me it's more important for the exposure on the Western culture than just the Chinese culture.
Right.
I think he'd have to start, if you want him to have like a foreign accent rather than like a Chinese accent, it probably needs to be deeply thrown into the culture very soon.
Very soon, okay.
Yeah, maybe by 8 years old, he needs to be having to speak.
Well, it's very funny.
English.
One of my best friends in Hong Kong, when you speak to him, he's fluent English. He went to the University of Michigan. Very smart fellow. But his parents put him into late stages of local school. That turned out to be a blessing in disguise because he ended up going to run businesses in China, and he's completely fluent to the point where he's writing legal documents and reading financial.
But I would say, in a weird way, like if we're just talking about English, I think Chinese is difficult to start, but easier to master. But I find that English is easy to start, but incredibly difficult to master.
That I actually disagree.
So because I mean, apart from grammatically, I find Chinese is quite straightforward. It's just the characters, the Chinese character, it can be complicated. But Pinyin kind of enables you to kind of skip most of the remembering the characters.
I think English is easier to learn as a native Chinese. But it also really depends on where your son wants to be when he gets older.
Hey guys, I'm going to have to skip out. We can end the show now, or somebody's at the door waiting for us downstairs and he can't get in. The wine man can't get in.
He's on the front door as well.
This is really interesting conversation, and it's really can go deeper and really interesting.
Fights yet.
But we'll be back. We'll be back because we'll be drinking some wine. Hasegawa-san, I'm coming to get you. I'm sorry about that. So thank you guys, and there'll be a part 2 with wine.
We have so much to talk about.